Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Politics Matters podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Jakubowski, and today we're going to be taking a look at Joe Biden's approval rating, looking at the gubernatorial elections coming up this November, because I have not previewed them on this podcast yet, and just talking about the state of American politics as of right now, May 2022. I think the first thing we're going to do is just look at Biden's approval rating and just talk about what that means, not for 2024 for like how popular he is, but 2022. And so I want to establish a few things before we really start this conversation here. So first of all, in my eyes, and I think most people who I respect enough to care about what they think politically, it is my opinion that Joe Biden's approval rating is a bad indicator of how the 2022 midterms are going to go. It's an indicator that exists, but I don't think that it's a very good indicator. And if you're making your predictions off of a Biden approval number in a state, you're going to be horribly wrong. And so I think it's important to remember that there are a lot of people who in these polls, when they're being asked, do you approve of Joe Biden? They're saying, no, I do not approve of Joe Biden. But, they're going to be voting Democrat no matter what in the midterms. There are plenty of progressives, people on the left of Biden, who think that he has not done enough or that the Democratic Party is incompetent and that they haven't done much, right? And they're disappointed in the administration, who say, no, I don't approve of Joe Biden. And then they, just will vote Democratic in November no matter what because they hate the Republicans 20 times more. There's an argument you can make that Joe Biden is just as popular as he was in 2020 because, there's this narrative that Biden has fallen off in terms of approval and that he is just, he was popular in 2020 and he beat Trump and now he's just unpopular, right? And I'm sure that the polls you will get will reflect that because, Biden didn't have an approval rating when he ran against Trump, but he had a favorability rating, and his favorables were always pretty good. They were always, he was +7, +8. He was always doing quite well, right? And so now his approval rating is now a net of negative 13.5, right? People are going to say the Biden that beat Trump was a much more popular Biden than the one that's governing America today. And, I don't disagree with that, but if you're going to genuinely tell me that you think Biden is 20% more unpopular than he was a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, I think that you're just mistaken. I don't think that there is enough room in such a polarized nation for a number like that to exist, because with Trump, his favorable ratings when he ran for president were, in the 30s. He became president, his approval rating was, 42, 43%, that range, right, where Biden is today. Right, I don't think that you genuinely would think that for Trump it would change by 20 points. Because if Trump had a 35% unfavorable rating when he, on election day 2016, then when he became president, his favorability rating shot up to 55%. I wouldn't have believed that. I don't think anyone really would have, because it's just bad polling. Pollsters aren't good at what they do, especially at a national level. It's not even a knock on polls. There are polls that I respect, but it is very hard to poll a country as big as America. The reason, people will always say that pollsters in America are uniquely bad, and that they'll show me a poll from Germany or from France or from Canada or from the United Kingdom. They'll say, this poll was so much better than the national poll that had Biden winning by 8 points more than he did. Okay, great, try to poll a country as big as America. It's a hard thing to do. It's not a criticism, it's just truth. If you're trying to poll a country of 330-something million people, ranging from Alaska to Maine, down to Southern California and the tip of Florida, it is going to be a very difficult thing to do. You cannot call random phone numbers from different zip codes all across the country and expect to get a reliable sample. You can get guesses, you can get micro-electorates, if you will, but you cannot get a reliable sample that will tell you enough about an electorate nationwide. You can do that in congressional districts and counties. This is why I like polling for local races, or for congressional races, or for, in Canada, parliamentary races, right? You can see an electorate of a couple 100,000 people, or of even a couple 70,000 people. You can do that, and you can look at these polls, and they'll be giving you pretty good numbers, and you can look at the cross-tabs, and you can say, well, this state or this district's 47% white, and they had white voters at 48%. That is a good poll, and that poll is one that I will take very seriously, that I will analyze and spend my time on, because I think it's worth my time. But if you're giving me a poll of 2,000 Americans in a country of 330 million and telling me that Joe Biden's approval rating has dipped by 20% in the span of 2 years, I am going to have my doubts. It's just reasonably not what's going to happen. I'm not saying Biden's popular. I'm not saying that he is as popular as he was on Election Day 2020. But if you're telling me that he is 20% more unpopular now than he was when he beat Donald Trump by a pretty slim amount, by the way, like I'd believe it if he won Texas and Ohio and Iowa and Florida. Now he was just polling as he is in those states, but like he didn't win the state. Like for example, he is polling very badly in Texas right now, right? Like his approvals in Texas are negative 20 something, right? Like he lost Texas, okay, and I believe that his approvals in Texas aren't good, but you cannot like when he won an election against such an unpopular incumbent so narrowly, you can't tell me that he was a popular figure to begin with. And that's why I think this was so predictable. Because let's be real here. A lot of you listening to this podcast probably voted for Joe Biden. A lot of you at least supported him. I think most of you guys know, I supported Joe Biden during the 2020 election. And, his presidency hasn't been amazing, obviously. Like, I haven't, been, a beneficiary of Joe Biden's presidency. But, I don't dislike the guy. I'm not I don't love him. I won't go around wearing Joe Biden 2024 hats and wearing capes and standing him on every occasion that it's presented, right? But I'm not gonna act like I don't like Joe Biden more than I like Donald Trump, because Joe Biden is already a better president than Donald Trump is in my eyes. But that's not the point here. The point here is that Joe Biden beat Trump was not popular. Trump had no business doing as well as he did. I will criticize Trump forever, obviously, as a president, as a person, as a policymaker. But his electoral performance in 2020 was pretty impressive, considering the fact that he had a 41.5% approval rating heading into election day. He had a historically bad economy. We were in the midst of a recession, a pandemic that he had mismanaged in the eyes of 60% of Americans. And he got 206 electoral votes, got more votes than Obama in 2008. And he got, he did incredibly. He got 74 million Americans to turn out and vote for him. He did incredibly well. He won swing states that were not won by Republicans. They lost, he won Ohio, he won Iowa, he won Florida, he won North Carolina. He won Texas, obviously, by bigger than expected. And he just did very well. And he carried the Republican Party to 50 Senate seats. He carried them to having a decent position in the House. Donald Trump was not the Republican Party's biggest problem in 2020. He didn't help them, but let's be real, a lot of Republicans would have done a lot worse than Donald Trump in 2020, given that position he was put in. He didn't help himself in terms of policy. As I said, I will never it's very hard to find the occasion in which I defend Donald Trump on policy. But the position that he was in, that he arguably put himself in, he still did quite well. He still won 232 electoral votes. He still, was within striking distance in Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona. And so Biden beat this bad incumbent, let's be real here. And he did it, sure, he won, in the Electoral College, he got a decent coalition, right? Not a landslide. But I would say he did quite well. In the Electoral College, it was a solid showing, right? But those states he won all. Arizona and Georgia were 10,000 votes. Wisconsin was 20,000 votes. Pennsylvania was, I want to say, 40 or 50,000 votes, right? They were all very close. They were very, very close. So Biden beat an unpopular incumbent by a very minuscule amounts. Let's be real here, in those states, and that's why he's president today. It's not like he had this resounding victory and now he's unpopular. It's no, he beat a bad incumbent. Barely escaped with the victory despite all the things he had going for him, and now he's not popular. Color me shocked. Right, so that's the first thing I wanted to address you. That's the first thing I wanted to kind of just say, no, I don't think that's true. And secondly, in all honesty here, do we really think that the people that are saying that they disapprove of Joe Biden, do we really think that enough of them are going to vote Republican? Because I can, so right now 538 has Biden's approval. We're at 41%, which is a number that I don't think is too unreasonable, but it's also a number that I'm not, not loving. It's probably a bit high. It's probably, probably 43, maybe 44%, that kind of range. But, of the 54% who disapprove of him, right, the vast majority of those people are Republicans, people who voted for Donald Trump, people who vote Republican in the midterms, people who vote Republican in the future. I get that, right? But a sizable chunk, let's say somewhere between 4 and 7% of that 54%, are probably people who voted for Biden in 2020. There are some Biden voters who probably will vote Republican in the future because they really don't like Biden. But there are probably lots of Biden voters who are telling pollsters that they disapprove of Joe Biden because they think he either hasn't gone far enough or has gone too far, and they will still vote for the Democratic Party in the midterms. The Democrats are in a bad position right now, but the Republican Party hasn't warmed up to former Biden voters, right? Like, they haven't compromised on positions, they haven't gotten more moderate, they haven't become the anti-Biden party. They'll act like they're anti-Biden when they need to, right? But they haven't become the alternative, or the opposition. They have become just the same Republican Party they were under Donald Trump. They haven't really changed that much. In many people's eyes, in my eyes, they've gotten more conservative. They've gotten more right-wing. They've become more of a nationalist, populist party than ever before. And that's scary to, I think, a lot of voters. And even if they don't like Joe Biden or even the Democratic Party and they think it's incompetent, like many progressives do, they'll still vote for it. They will still vote for Democrats because they are terrified of Republicans. Republicans are running candidates in these, especially gubernatorial elections, that we'll talk about later in this podcast, like Doug Mastriano, Carrie Lake, that are, let's be real here, they're people that are not qualified for holding elected office, especially when they think that a free and fair election was stolen. They are openly saying that Doug Mastriano was at the Capitol on January 6th, right? Like, these aren't people that you can respectfully disagree with. These are people that are legitimate threats to democracy. And I'm not saying I know for sure what Doug Mastriano or Carrie Lake's intentions are, but there is reason to be concerned as someone who is a big fan of American democracy. I am not pleased with what the GOP is doing here, because my fundamental belief is that I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican. I'm someone who is going to support a party when the other party is terrifying me, right? Like, I supported Biden in 2020. I'll probably support the Democrats in the 2022 midterms unless something changes or my views change, which is possible, but not likely, right? And the issue here is that I would love to have an alternative. I would love to have an out. I'd love to say, look, the GOP has these good solutions. They are offering these things. They've got plans here. But to me, they're not a political party that speaks to me, especially as someone who is in the younger generation, right? Like, I'm a Gen Zer, right? Like I'm a Zoomer, right? If that's what you want to call it. I don't think the GOP cares about me that much. The Democrats probably don't either, but they're putting forth policy proposals. And so I would love to see the GOP reach out to me or reach out to anyone outside their base, quite frankly, because they don't care about me and they don't care about people who are voting for them. So, until that happens, me and many other people will probably be essentially Democrats at the ballot box. So, we might not approve of Joe Biden. We might, have, nitpicks of his presidency, but will it matter if we vote Democratic in November, if we even vote for Biden again? Or, not even that, maybe, because, I believe Biden's the favorite to lose re-election if he runs right now. I don't think that he would be able to, I think Biden on a debate stage in 2024 is terrifying to me as a Democrat, right? Or as, not technically a Democrat, but as someone who leans closer to that party than the Republican Party, right? That idea isn't great, because Biden's already not a good speaker as is. He has a speech impediment. He is, he's someone who I think is aging, and that doesn't bode well for him. I don't think he has dementia. Do people who think Biden has dementia are legitimately just not qualified to make that diagnosis? But I also don't want to imagine Biden as an 81-year-old Joe Biden being on a debate stage with Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis or whoever the GOP runs, right? So, for that reason, I just really, really would like to see a sort of, change within this party. Not to Kamala Harris either, but, Biden, the bottom line here for Biden is that he is not going to be in a good position if he runs for re-election. He might win re-election narrowly, but, if he runs, he'll have a lot of obstacles to face, and I don't think he can overcome those, because he's not someone who... Because, Joe Biden's a boring candidate. He'll do well in 2020, when you put him in a position like he was in. He won't mess up, okay? his campaign wasn't perfect, but he didn't like have any like massive blunders that would have cost him the election, right? Unlike Hillary Clinton or even Kamala Harris or like even Al Gore or John Kerry, really. Unlike that group of candidates, Biden won't have historic blunders that will cost him the election. He'll have mistakes, but he won't have blunders. And so that's why he's good when you put him in a position like he was put in 2020. He'll win the election. He'll deliver it to you. But he's not a charismatic dude. He can't overcome these. His base isn't anywhere as loyal to him as Trump's base is, or even as most Republicans, or even some Democrats like Bernie Sanders, right? Like the notion that Biden can like overcome these challenges politically is just weird to me, because he doesn't have that base that he can rely on, right? Like he'll have people who will vote for him no matter what. Like 40% of the country will vote for Joe Biden no matter what. Another, let's set 70% will vote for him in all likelihood, right? But like realistically, he doesn't have as big of a base as Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders does. He does well because he wins independents when he's put into good positions. So, unless you're telling me that Biden has this charisma that he hasn't shown in the past, 9 years, I'm going to be a little hesitant to believe that he can come out of a hole that he has put himself in. And that's why I just think he's not the favorite to win re-election right now. And so, for his approval rating, right, sure, he's unpopular. He's not in a position to win re-election. But does it really cost Democrats and the Republicans are running candidates that are just as disapproved of as the president is right now? Are left-leaning voters going to say, I don't like Joe Biden, but this Republican is literally insane? Most of them are going to vote for the Democratic candidate, especially if it's someone who's good, like, candidate quality matter. Josh Shapiro is a good candidate. Katie Hobbs I don't know about, but she might be good if she starts running a campaign, because right now it looks like she is going to run an awful campaign. She looks like she's headed down the Katie McGinty route, which is run a campaign for no one and lose a winnable race. So let's hope that doesn't happen. I mean, I will support her against Carrie Lake, because Carrie Lake is a crazy person, but Katie Hobbs' campaign right now does not look like it's headed down a good route. But hey, Josh Shapiro looks like he'll do a good job. At least it seems like it's too early to tell, really, but we'll have to see what Josh Shapiro does. But yeah, so approval rating for Biden is, don't read too much into it. It's probably higher than it is already, and a lot of people who are saying they disapprove of Biden are Democratic voters anyways. Like, when you look at the crosstabs, Biden has fallen with every demographic since he was elected. Hispanic voters, black voters, white voters, Asian voters. But the group he's fallen the least with, specifically are white voters with college degrees. He's only fallen by, I think, 7% in the latest polling we've seen with them. But he's fallen by like 20, 30, even 40% with black and Hispanic voters, right? So, unless Hispanics outright vote Republican in 2022, which is about as likely as what's something that's unlikely to happen? Which is about as likely as the United States annexing Greenland. So, let's be real here. Not going to happen. So I think that that really concludes it. Yeah, so we're going to get into our gubernatorial map here real quickly. Just remember that. Which is about as likely as the Earth colliding with the Moon in the next 2 seconds, so not going to happen. But I want to look at when we talk about these crosstabs, right, and these samples we're seeing. Shoot, I just dropped my pen. We can tell that Biden's falling, but unless Republicans get 40% of the black vote or win the Hispanic vote, it's not going to happen. These people who the polls are either oversampling Republicans, which is always possible, or they're just getting responses from black and Hispanic Democrats that are saying, I don't like what Joe Biden's doing. That being said, I'm still going to vote for the Democratic Party in November. So that option B is likely what's happening, right? Because obviously Biden's press coverage is terrible. He doesn't his communications have been bad as well. He hasn't communicated, effectively, because he has Build Back Better itself is popular. Biden's positions on stuff like abortion, gay marriage, even healthcare and infrastructure, they're all popular positions. It's just he doesn't communicate them, which is frustrating. But right, so there are plenty of voters who are going to vote for the Democratic Party in November that disapprove of Joe Biden right now, and that to me is evident. But so Biden's approval rating, not great, obviously, for the Democrats, but it's like if they lose, it won't be because of Biden's unpopularity. It'll be because they failed to galvanize voters and they failed to run good campaigns, which is what I think is, we could be seeing in a lot of places, but it's also, aren't seeing it in a lot of places, because the Democrats are going to have to run ahead in a lot of areas to win, right? Like in states that narrowly voted for Joe Biden, they're going to have to do better than Biden's approval rating. Like we're actually seeing that in polling, right? So we'll get, I read a Nevada poll a few weeks back, right, and it had Sisolak winning re-election, I think by 5%, I want to say. I don't know exactly. It was like 4 or 5% or something like that. And the interesting thing was that Biden was like, I think 27% underwater in Nevada, which is a number that I don't believe, first of all. It's probably closer to like 15 or, it's probably, like Biden probably has like a 41% approval rating in Nevada or something like that. But the point is, Biden was really bad in Nevada. And Sisolak was still winning re-election. And that, to me, just proves that Democrats will, say they don't like Joe Biden, but they'll gladly support their nominees in November, which is kind of it doesn't surprise me, but it also goes to show that the Democratic base is maybe more reliable than we thought it would be. Like this is not me, painting a rosy picture for Democrats in the midterms. They're still going to lose Senate seats. They're still going to lose the House. They're still going to lose a lot of winnable races. But they're going to win, the notion the Democrats are going to lose every House seat that was within 7% in 2020, not going to lose every competitive gubernatorial and Senate election, just to me is a little far-fetched because it never works that way. Even in wave elections, we see exceptions, right? 20% of the seats that are toss-up-y, lean ratings, right, go the other way. They go towards the party that got wiped out. So Democrats might get wiped out in the House, but they'll probably hold on to a few of their competitive seats. They'll probably win a few random House seats they weren't expected to win on a night like that. They might win a random Senate seat that we don't know about. The Democrats might win a few gubernatorial elections, right? Because it's just different. And so Biden's approval rating makes it look worse for Democrats than it actually is. And I can say that without being optimistic for the Democratic Party's chances in 2022. So, yeah, I think we should get into the gubernatorial elections quickly here before I kind of wrap up this podcast. I just want to briefly talk about the GOP's fundamental problem here. So, in case you haven't watched my YouTube video, which you should go do, my channel is called Unbiased Election Predictions. I predict elections there, as the name suggests. But I've currently got 28 seats for the Republicans, governor's mansions, I should say. 22 for the Democrats, and so I'll go through this quickly. Democrats, so competitive races, the Democrats are going to win Nevada, New Mexico, Minnesota, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Maine, and then Connecticut if you count that as competitive, which I don't. And the GOP, and obviously they'll also flip Maryland, Massachusetts. And then the GOP narrowly hold Nevada, flip Kansas, win Texas, obviously, flip Wisconsin, obviously they hold on to Iowa and Ohio, hold on to Georgia, hold on to Florida, and yeah, that's it. So, of the core, I call them the core races, we've got, I think, 6 races that are really going to decide this, right? Nevada and Arizona 7 races. There are 4 in the Sun Belt, 3 in the Rust Belt. You got Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Georgia in the Sun Belt, which has splitting 2-2, Republicans winning Arizona and Georgia, Democrats winning Nevada and New Mexico. And then you've got 3 in the Rust Belt, which are Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Democrats, I have them winning Michigan, Pennsylvania, have the Republicans winning Wisconsin. So, of those 7, I have the Democrats winning 4, and the Republicans winning 3, meaning that it would be overall, relative to expectations, a decent night for Democrats, right? Because, obviously it's still a bad night, but, relative to the expectations I have for Republicans, which are that they'll do well, they'll probably lose a few winnable races, especially in states like Nevada, Michigan, Pennsylvania. And if they lose Georgia or Arizona or, even Wisconsin's a little far-fetched, I think that's pretty leaning Republican. But, if they lose Arizona or Georgia, that is going to be a blunder on their part, right? Because in Arizona, they should have gone behind Kimberly Yee, because she would have destroyed Katie Hobbs. Carrie Lake, she's narrowly favored over Katie Hobbs, but, she's a bad candidate who is going to turn off a lot of winnable suburban voters for the Republicans, and it's unfortunate for them that Trump endorsed Carrie Lake. So, I have the Republicans favored in Arizona, but not by much. So if they lose one of Arizona or Georgia, that'll be blunders on their part. And if they somehow manage to lose Wisconsin to Tony Evers when he won by 0.6% in 2018, that will be embarrassing. Because he won narrowly in a blue wave, and his state has gotten so much redder over the past few years, and it's Wisconsin, it's a red wave, and they have Ron Johnson on the ballot. If Tony Evers manages to somehow win re-election, I will be stunned, because everything is going against him, and if he still manages to win, with everything going on, the Republicans are going to have to, I think Republican brains will explode, which I'd like Tony Evers. It would be cool to see him win a re-election, but I don't think he will, in all honesty. And I think he has a 20-25% chance of winning, if that, right? And I think he loses by 5. His race is a lean Republican, but it's closer to being likely Republican than toss-up. So if they lose even one of those 3 races, that's blowing winnable race. Michigan, I have them currently not favored in Michigan because James Craig looks like he won't be on the ballot. If James Craig runs against, if Craig is on the ballot, he'll probably be their nominee, and the Craig versus Whitmer matchup is in my eyes, tote Republican or even lean Republican. And then a Whitmer versus anyone else matchup is a tilt or lean D matchup. So for now, I've got tilt Democrat, but that could change in either direction. And I also just want to briefly note that, for whatever reason, Gretchen Whitmer is leading in the polls. She was down in most recent polls. She was at 45%, down by 1 point to a generic Republican. But she's beating even James Craig. When you look at the polling we've seen, and you go on 538 and you just survey that you go to governor in Michigan, right? Gretchen Whitmer's polling quite well for whatever reason. She in the latest poll we've seen with her versus Craig from February, she was beating Craig by a point. She was at 45, he was at 44, and then the other polls had her beating Craig by 5 points and 10 points. And then we saw a poll from January saying, actually James Craig internal polls saying that they were even, and that she was up by 1. There were 2 internals from Craig, that had them even, that Whitmer was up 1. So Gretchen Whitmer keeps being ahead in the polls. I don't know why, but she just is popular right now for some reason, and so as a result of that, I think she narrowly holds on, but it's close. It's really, really close, and especially considering the fact that there's no Republican Senate candidate, she probably gets bailed out by that in the end, because if Michigan was a high-profile state this year, like it was in 2020 and like it was in 2018, it'd be different, right? Because you have Republicans just hammering Biden there, but that might not happen. If Craig's not on the ballot and the GOP, their internals are having them down by 8 points every time, they might just be nah, we're not even gonna try here, and they just pull out in August or September, and just Whitmer cruises to a 4 or 5 point victory on election night. That wouldn't stun me. It might be that race that happens. The other, it'll either be in Michigan and Pennsylvania, because I really think the Democrats win one of those just out of GOP, just total GOP incompetency in those states. Because Craig failing to qualify for ballot is such a F around and find out moment. In Pennsylvania, Trump endorsing Mastriano because of his baseless voter fraud claims is ultimate GOP facepalm, because the Republican when Mastriano won that primary, the Republican leadership all massively facepalmed and were oh, not this again, right? And he only got 43% of the vote. He was not even that popular in this primary. He won with a small plurality, right? But they tried to coalesce around Barletta. They tried to get McSwain and White to drop out. McSwain and White did not drop out. They took away a lot of votes from Barletta, and Barletta did not win that primary. So, just not a very not a very good night for the Republican establishment, obviously, because they wanted to just nominate Barletta or even White or McSwain. They didn't care as long as it wasn't Mastriano, and so they want to be able to run a normal candidate in Pennsylvania, and they're getting dude who is at January 6th, who's probably crazy, who will probably say a lot of ridiculous things on the campaign trail against the best Democratic recruit in the state outside of Tom Wolf, right? Because Josh Shapiro is an overperforming attorney general. He won by 5 in 2020. He did very well in every area that's trending away from Democrats. With Matt Cartwright on the ballot in the 8th district, with Democrats trying to hold their, because Pennsylvania doesn't, like, a state like Wisconsin or Ohio or Arizona and or even New Mexico too, they generally like trend with the national environment, right? Like, you know, they swing a lot, they fluctuate, right? Pennsylvania is usually always competitive, even if it's in a red or blue wave. And Democrats have a pretty high ceiling, pretty high floor there. Like, they reliably get 48, even 49% of the vote, no matter how bad their candidates are. And so that, to me, right, like Shapiro, I think not narrowly, but like he wins by 3%, okay margin over Mastriano, and so I think that's just enough for me to like look at it and go, okay, yeah, Mastriano cost the Republicans a seat here because Barletta would have been a much better matchup for them anyways. So yeah, Pennsylvania lean Democratic. And then the last thing I want to get to is Nevada, because I talked about it's the last time I talked about. I've got to just tilt Democratic. I think Sisolak does very well in Washoe. I think he does well with the Reno suburbanite people, and I think he also runs a little bit ahead of Cortez Masto in the Las Vegas suburbs, right? Like Henderson, Paradise. What's the other one called? It's North Las Vegas, and Enterprise, right? Like when you look at those cities, they're deep Democratic trending, but the Republicans still need to win those areas to have a chance of winning statewide. And Sisolak, I think, is a good candidate for those regions, especially because he brands himself as a fairly moderate Democrat who isn't too close to Biden. And again, we've seen polls where Biden's doing terribly in Nevada, but Sisolak is still. All right, like Sisolak is still winning, so there's enough crossover there that makes me think he's favored, especially against Joe Lombardo, who I think is overrated as a candidate because Joe Lombardo, like being the police chief of Clark County, is great until you realize the record that he has, and that probably hurts him with a lot of urban and even suburban, moderate voters, and so I think that that's enough for Sisolak to win. But yeah, just wanted to preview my gubernatorial map. I think Republicans have a slightly worse than expected night here, but do better in other areas, but we'll talk about later, so stay tuned for that. But I think that's it for this episode. Again, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, go follow me on Twitter. I'm at Ryan Jakubowski. You can go follow the podcast on Twitter at PM Podcast 2022. You can follow me on YouTube at Unbiased Election Predictions. Read my writing at uepyt.substack.com, and if you do all that, you are officially one of the coolest and most valid people in the entire world. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you all in the next episode.